Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I'm Lauren. I'm a wife and a new mom. I came up with the idea of this podcast after struggling to find mommy groups around me when my son was born. I wanted a community of mothers I heard so many of my friends talk about when they had their children. This podcast is to help mothers like me that want a community of mothers to connect with when they have their free time. Together with my usual guest, Taryn, and other mothers, we will share our experiences, not our advice, through motherhood, and hopefully get some tips from you, the listeners. So come join us on the Mommy Escape Time podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I am your host today, Lauren. Actually, I'm always your host, just so you're aware. I don't know why I said today. But yes, I am your host.
We're switching roles.
I know.
It's because we're switching roles.
Well, the last week I actually did a solo show, and I just talked for 25 minutes total. So I hope last week I didn't say something silly like, today I'm your host.
Or today's guest is me.
Yes, talking a lot. So yes, I am Lauren, your host, and I am here with Taryn.
Hi.
And today we are going to talk all about Lauren's pregnancy journey.
Yeah, you already heard enough about mine.
So, and ours were pretty different. So
extremely different.
Yeah. I only had one.
Right. Yeah, for starters, the number of children being born.
Yes. So I'm going to let you talk.
Yeah, I'm going to be asking the questions today. I'm so excited. So when you found out you were pregnant, I knew pretty early on because we were working together. Mm-hmm. And I remember asking, how are you feeling? And you were like, I'm not too bad. I'm a little nauseous. So can you just talk about how your pregnancy started and how you were feeling as it was going on?
It's kind of funny because I will start off with, because I got married in my 30s, I just assumed that I would have trouble getting pregnant. It was just, I just assumed, because everyone's like, oh, if you have a baby after 30, then there's no chance
of you. Almost high risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the year after my husband and I got married, I was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm the healthiest I am, that I get checked out by a doctor, that I don't have any outside conditions happening, because I want to do what I can, like in preparation for when we do want to start having a family.
That's a great idea.
Right. So for a year, I ate healthy, worked out as much as I can, and I had my good weeks and my bad weeks, obviously, like everyone does. And I started to see a naturopath, and I know we've talked about that before in our Eating Well or whatever the one was about food. As if you want to go back to listen about that.
Food pretty frequently, so it could be one of many.
So I think, and I went for acupuncture, I think, once a week for about 6 months before we even considered starting to think about pregnancy. So for 6 months, all I did was work on myself. And then for 6 months, I was on acupuncture. And I really tried to learn a lot about my body and like what it was doing and all my cycles and how that all worked. Not that I didn't know how it all worked, but I just couldn't understand how some people could get pregnant so easily.
Not even trying.
And I was like, it's math. Like, we're math people. Hey. So I couldn't physically wrap my head around it. And after I figured it out that like, okay, yeah, there are certain times that are obviously going to work more than others, that it was just that was all the knowledge I needed. Not that I didn't have that knowledge already, but it was just like, okay, I just need to pay attention maybe more.
Now, did you do the basal thermometer for temperature?
No, I know you gave it to me. At first I did, my naturopath had me try these, I don't know how else to describe them, but they're pee on a stick things.
Oh, like an ovulation kit.
To know how, when you're ovulating, just to kind of like, because I was not regular before that, so we were trying to see if I could get into a regular cycle.
Gotcha.
And so that was more the point, was to try and figure out if my cycles could become regular, because that was not the case, because I had been on birth control for way too long. I don't know why I ever listened to my doctor. And I did change doctors because I never should have been on birth control for as long as I was, because it was for a medical reason, not for birth the control. Reason it's for. I think my body just had to learn how to to produce estrogen itself again. And it took a while.
Yeah.
It definitely took, I would say it took about 8 months to have a regular cycle for me.
To even be able to figure out the timing.
Right, to figure out the timing. So I wouldn't have, in that 8 months, I would not have been able to try anyways, because, I mean, I guess I could have tried, but nothing actually would have happened. I can tell you that right now.
So I had a similar experience, and I don't remember if I talked about leading up to the pregnancy, but I have PCOS and was told there's no way you're going to be able to conceive naturally. And then I followed a very similar path where I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to try and figure it out. So kudos to you for doing that without having doctors be like, no, you're just not going to conceive. Sorry.
I know. And I was I already went into it thinking I would never be able to get pregnant without going to a dramatic route, because I've had so many friends that have had that. So in my mind, I never thought that I would naturally conceive. I just never thought that would be a thing. And so I remember the first time I went to go take this pregnancy test, and I was like, all right, well, everyone says you just buy a cheap, drugstore one and you just buy it. So I took one, and of course it was negative. And I was like, all right, well, so it didn't, the first time we tried, it didn't work, whatever. And that day I went to a baby shower. And I was a little sad. I was like, oh, I wish, whatever. It's the first time you try. I didn't obviously expect it. And I thought about how much my friend who was pregnant, what all the stuff she had to go through for, who we were at the baby shower for. And so I was like, so this is my new journey. I'm going to be on this journey, that she did, years and years.
Yeah.
And so that was a Sunday, and the next day was Monday, and I went running, and I came home, and this was right at the end of our summer vacation.
Yeah.
This was a Monday. I will remember this for the rest of my life. This was a Monday. We were going back to school on a Wednesday. So I went running, I came home, and I was exhausted. I could not move, and I ran 3 miles. That was nothing for me.
You could do that as a warm-up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was exhausted, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what? And I stayed in bed the entire day. I've never stayed in bed like that before in my life. And I was like, okay. I was like, maybe tomorrow I'll take another pregnancy test just to make sure.
Just in case.
I was like, I'm sure it's not that, but I'm like, I'm 5 days late, I'm like, let me just, I'll see what happens. So the next morning, because they say the morning is what you should be, when you should be taking the test, especially in the beginning. And I took the pregnancy test and I left it because you know how I'm like, I don't want to watch it.
Right. Might jinx the results.
Yes. So I left it, and I don't know. I went to go do something for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, I left it in the bathroom. I better go check on it. And I went back and I kept looking at it. It was one of the ones that either says not pregnant or pregnant in words.
So it's very clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not is that line there? Is it not there? And I'm getting ready to go back to school. So it was 5:30 in the morning at this point. And I look at it and it said pregnant. And I was so shocked. And I was I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And my husband was in the basement working out. And I was like, do I tell him? So I ran downstairs. And at first I was like, do I bring the pregnancy test? I'm like,
let me
nope.
bring what I just peed on.
I was like, I think he'll believe me without seeing it. So I ran downstairs and I told him, and we were very excited. And then I couldn't be calm for a second, and then I was like, oh, that's why I was tired yesterday, or
yes.
So
and the pregnancy brain was already starting because
right.
you even forgot about the test in the bathroom,
right? Because I never thought that I would get pregnant that fast, and I just never had that expectation. So
it was first try,
first time. So yeah, it was.
Your husband must have been disappointed. Sorry.
We still practiced before then, just at the wrong time to make sure we knew when the wrong time was.
Yes,
so
of course.
Yeah, of course. So I remember I went for a walk. I used to go for walks constantly, and in the summer I walk all the time. So in my morning walk, I remember leaving, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like, I need to find out when my due date is now.
Immediately.
Because, that's the first thing. And I remember looking it up and it said May 1st. And I was like, oh my God, that's the perfect time in teacher world.
It really is. If anyone who knows teaching, the ideal time to give birth is like middle to end of April, beginning of May, because the maternity leave leads then into the summer. So you get additional time with your newborn, and it's just so amazing.
And it was exactly 6 weeks, if we had no snow days last year, to my due date until the end of the school year. So I was like, oh, this is going to be so awesome. Of course, it didn't end up like that, but that's okay. So we'll get to that.
Thickens.
So I remember I was like, Taryn and I taught 2 classes together, and it was really odd because I had called my naturopath that day and I was like, I need to take a blood test. And so she sent me the blood work, and I went that day that I found out that I was pregnant and went for a blood test because she wanted to make sure that we could check my HCG levels through my blood over the next couple of weeks, and just to make sure things were progressing. She's like, because taking a bunch of pregnancy tests every day aren't going to help you either.
Right, because even if the HCG isn't increasing, it's still going to register on a pregnancy test that you're pregnant.
Right. So I didn't want to have false hope. And I took about 7 pregnancy tests, I would say, from that day. I took a pregnancy test every single day for at least a week. And I went for blood work. That day I went 4 days, I went every 4 days for 3 weeks. And then after the 3 weeks, even after the second time I went, my HCG levels were skyrocketing every time. So I wasn't too concerned, to the point where when I was pregnant, my naturopath was like, just remember, these numbers are high, so you need to be aware that you could be having twins. And that was my biggest fear. So Tuesday went, and now I'm starting school on Wednesday. And it's very weird to start off a school year being like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And no one else knows.
Nobody.
And obviously I'm not showing it 2 days.
No.
So, and I remember we were sitting next to each other. We had this big long meeting for 3 hours that first day. And I don't remember when I told you that day, but I remember sitting next to you for 3 hours and being like, do I tell her now? 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 I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to be. I'm like, I have to tell someone.
Right. There needs to be that one person that I can confide in.
Right. And so I don't know if I must have told you at some point in our first couple of days before the kids came back.
Yeah, it was definitely before the kids came back.
Yeah.
And I remember we were in the math workroom and you were like, I just need to tell you something. It's very early on. And I lost my mind. I was so excited.
I know. So, because Taryn had been obviously with me the last year when we were prepping, and I had been going, and I was like, oh, this isn't working and this isn't working. And so I guess it was just sort of a shock altogether. So moving forward, I had felt great. And at 5 weeks, I was like, okay. I'm like, this is great. I'm like, I'm not going to. My biggest fear being pregnant was getting sick. I was like, I just can't get sick. I can't get sick. I can't get sick. I'm like, it can't be like that. And I don't remember when it started. I just remember. No, I do remember, because my pregnancy was like clockwork. At 6 weeks, I was throwing up, because at 6 weeks, they say you can start throwing up. At 6 weeks, I was throwing up.
Yeah, and I remember that because when you said I'm feeling fine, I was like, oh, well, it's still early. And then you came in and you were like, I am not feeling well. And I was like, how far along? And you were like, 6 weeks. And I was like, oh, yeah, here we go.
Yes. So I met with my doctor at 7 weeks. That was the first time that I went in. And it was really funny because, they make you take a pregnancy test when you go. And I was like, okay,
you're like, do you want me to bring the 7 others that I have? Because I can show you.
I was like, and I have the blood work from the past 4 weeks that I've been going, but okay, sure, I'll take a pregnancy test. So I took a pregnancy test. She goes, okay, so congratulations, you're pregnant. I was like, great. I was like, so I'm pretty nauseous. I'm like, I'm throwing up probably about 8 times a day. I'm like, I haven't really kept anything down. And yeah. And
8 times a day.
Yeah, that was pretty average with me. And I would say minimal water.
Yowza.
And when you're that sick pregnant, you there's something that anyone who would understand that has gone through this, those like little bits of left in a water bottle of like soda or water, I would get furious when my husband would throw those away because I was like, I'm still drinking it. Like, because that's the amount that I could drink at a time in like a meal sitting, and he would throw them away. He learned not to, don't worry.
Quick learning curve when you have a pregnant wife.
Yes. And I would sleep all the time. I would go to work and I would come home and I would sleep for like 4 hours because I haven't eaten anything, and now I'm sick all the time and I just worked a whole day.
Right. And throwing up is exhausting. I wasn't even throwing up and I was sleeping a lot. So I can't even imagine how tired you must have been.
And it was at the time it was fine because eventually I would be okay, but I didn't know that at the time. So at 8 weeks, all weekend I had not eaten. I had thrown up and I had slept, and that's it. And I'd barely gotten any water. So I called the doctor again. I was like, maybe we should do something. She's like, when was the last time you ate? I was like, I'm like, well, I tried on Saturday. She's like, when was the last time you kept down food? I was like, like a week and a half. And she was like, you need to go to the hospital right now.
And this was before people at work knew.
Yes.
And Lauren never takes sick days.
Yes.
At all.
So I had taken the last 2 years, I had not taken one day off, not even a half day, so I could save up for my maternity leave. So that's what I had done.
The best laid plans.
I know. So I was like, okay. So I remember I walked into my boss who had just started that school year, and I closed her door and she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, you are not quitting, are you? And I was like, no. I'm like, I'm pregnant and I'm throwing up all the time and someone else needs to know. She's like, oh, okay. Do you need to go to the hospital? I go, yeah, they just called me. She's like, okay. See you later. And so she's like, here's my cell phone number. Let me know when you'll be back. And I was like, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm like, I don't have I have to save my days for when I have the child. Like, what are you talking about?
You're so cute.
Haha, on me. So I went to the emergency room and they were like, oh, yeah, we need to do IV fluids on you. And I was like, okay, sure. So I was sitting there and like, whatever. I had my own private room and I've never been into an emergency room. First of all, when I got to the emergency room, they were like, shuffling me in. Like, I was like, hi, I'm Lauren. And they were like, oh, this woman, she needs to go in right now. And I was like, and they like paged someone and they came to get me. And I was like, hi. And so like,
I'm going to say I'm pregnant every time I go to the ER now.
But like, I didn't even, my doctor had called ahead and just said that I was like a priority patient or something like that. So I had like my own private room, which had a bathroom in it, like in the emergency room. I didn't know these like places existed in an emergency room. No. I guess they do though. So they set me up and they set me up with an IV, and then they set me up with another IV, and then they set me up with my third IV, and the doctor comes in and she's like, so you are doing a little better. She's like, but how much have you been throwing up? And I'm like, oh yeah, like every day, all the time. She's like, okay, so that's like not normal.
Not normal.
And I was like,
no.
Oh, I thought it was normal. And she's like, no. She's like, you should be able to keep something down in a day. And I was like, I know, but like everyone says like they feel nauseous or they didn't really eat today. So I took it literally that people did not eat and felt I always feel nauseous. I'm like, I just normally also throw up. So she's like, no. And she's like, oh, you have the blah, blah, blah condition. And I've had 3 different names by every different doctor that I saw. They all call it something different. Yes. Everyone else knows it as the Kate Middleton pregnancy disease.
Exactly. The one where she's hospitalized for most of the pregnancy because she's so dehydrated.
Right. So that's what I had, apparently. So I don't think it was as bad as her because I would go in and get my IV fluids and then I would leave that day.
If you could see the face I'm giving Lauren right now, looks could kill. Lauren's was bad.
So long story short, I think this was my cycle from week 8 to week 10 was I would go to work for 2 days and then I would leave work and I would go to the hospital and I would get an IV, go into work for 2 days, and I would come back later that night. There's a few times where in the middle, like at the end of the day, I was like, oh no, it's been too much. I have to go to the hospital. And then I would be overnight and I'd miss a day, but I was really trying not to miss any more days, but I probably missed like 3 days in there. And then week 10 came and it got so bad. I just couldn't keep up. It was like I would have to go every single day.
And we also had young teenagers,
boys
who had not quite figured out the whole showering and hygiene thing, and I was having trouble staying in our classroom, so I could not imagine what you were going through, to the point where we had our school nurse come in and talk to our students just so that Lauren could stay in the classroom for an extended period of time.
Right. And if you don't know, yes, I threw up in almost all of my classes in front of my students. A lot of times I made it to the bathroom, and ironically there was never anyone in the bathroom with me when it happened. So
you're lucky.
I was very lucky. At work, people were starting to get suspicious, I would say. And at week 10, I taught with another teacher, and I had to tell her at that point. And then the fifth time I went into the hospital, they were like, okay, we have to keep you overnight. And I was like,
did you hear that? She said 5 times.
So I was like, okay. So that was actually the first time that I felt better, because I was hydrated through the whole night. And that, I think that's just what I needed. It's just, it got too far I think they thought that they caught it early enough that I wasn't going to be that bad off, but I just couldn't catch up from 6 weeks. So that was my life for a month. And then they said, you have to take this medicine. It's safe for the baby. And there's something at 10 weeks that you can take. And I was really back and forth on it. And I was like, at this point, I could lose the baby, because I was losing so much weight and I physically could not stay hydrated. So I was like, at this point, I have to give in and I have to take the medicine. So I started the medicine and I was able to eat. And I remember the first day I ate, because it was like amazing. But at this point, I had been out of school a bunch of times. So at 10 weeks, it was almost 11 weeks, I had to tell people at work, because when I came back when I was hospitalized overnight, they had kept me out for like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, it was a long absence.
Yeah, and people were like really concerned. Like,
again, coming from the woman who never took a day off, who had now been absent several times, and this time for more than 1 day in a row.
Right, and people knew I was in the hospital. Someone let it slip. They didn't mean to, and so one person knew, and then everyone knew. So then when I came back, it was like, I told my husband, I said, I think I'm going to have to tell people at work. I'm like, I don't want to, but it is what it is. And when you're a teacher, I have a different type of a teaching job as a special ed teacher. I work with so many teachers in the building, and I work in an office with 4 other people. So it's not like I have my own room and I'm all alone and whatnot. So
there's not a lot of privacy in your job.
No, there's no privacy for that part. So it was tough, but I ended up telling people, and it was fine. I mean, it was fine. I'll get into that. So, but I think at 4 months, I could stop going to the hospital to get IVs. I still needed to go, even with the medicine. Yeah. I went about once a week at that point, and that was enough. And then at week 16, I went to go. Because I just always went on this one day, and I went, and they were like, no, your levels are fine. They're like, have you thrown up this week? I'm like, I can't remember, but I'm fine. So, but I learned very early on that what brought on the nausea and the extra vomiting was definitely the heat. The heat was like the worst thing for me.
And we don't have air conditioning in our building. No. So that did not help.
No. And second floor, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So it was tough. And then the other thing, being pregnant and working every period of the day, I work with a different group of people, not just students, but different adults. I always have another adult in the room with me, not because of anything special.
To keep an eye on you, of course.
Right. It's the intensity of which my students need help is why I have another adult in the room with me. And so every period, someone would ask me, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What have you eaten today? And that really started to get to me. And everyone was doing it out of the niceness of their hearts, obviously, but it got to be so much. And obviously I was so self-conscious about eating because everyone would be like, oh, you can keep that down. You can keep that down. And I'd be like, oh my gosh. And Taryn will tell you, I ate an apple. Yes. I had a knife.
With a special knife.
With a special knife that I could cut up my apple because I couldn't just bite into an apple like a normal person because that would make me sick. So I had to cut up an apple. And I would carry around this paper plate thing too with a special knife. And I would eat my apple. And like that's really what I would eat even to 16 weeks. I mean, I might eat some crackers or things like that, but I still wasn't like eating. And lunchtime was hard because being around other people's food and people scrutinizing, not meaning to, but, you know, just curious about what I could and couldn't eat.
Ginger ale and crackers again, huh?
Right. And so what ended up happening is I just ate in my car because it was just, it took the pressure off me of people talking about my food, what I was eating. And I pretty much did it my whole pregnancy. And it wasn't anyone's fault. It wasn't anything anyone was doing. It was just, I'd never had a relationship with food like this. So this is what I did. And my friend who I was at the baby shower for had her child, and I would call her every day when I was in the car. So
that's nice. And that's almost like self-care. Like you were doing it because you needed to protect yourself from all of the people who were caring just in a way that wasn't beneficial for you because they were unaware that it was too much.
Right.
Maybe they hadn't been pregnant in long enough time that they didn't remember how irritating questions like that could be.
Right. And I mean, people would ask me all the time, have you thrown up today? And I mean, to the point when I was leaving from my pregnancy. So yeah, I know that people meant well. It's just for me, that's not what I needed at the time. And so then I would say months 4, 5, and 6 were pretty, I don't want to say boring, but they were. Like you were
pretty routine.
Right. I went back to life. I did not really cook. Cooking, I couldn't do a lot of cooking because that still was not a big thing for me.
Yeah.
But I would say like around month 6, I really did start getting back into cooking, and I would work out. I ran until 6 months pregnant. My goal was to run 9 months pregnant because my doctor said she ran the day that she gave birth. And I was like, oh, I want to do that.
That's my goal.
But that's not what worked out. I had really bad shin splints. My body just couldn't adjust to the weight in the front because I've never had weight in the front, obviously.
Right.
So I'm small chested. That's what that means. So that was just pretty much routine. And then I think at the end of my 6th month, I had come to you and I was like, oh my gosh, my back, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And you had me go to your chiropractor that you had gone to when you were pregnant.
Yeah.
And I went and I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to start doing this a little more often. And so I kept going during this time. And then the only other really odd thing that happened during my pregnancy was that I had very weird sensory issues. Mm-hmm. So I didn't like when things brushed up against me, like my skin, like not clothing wise, but like anything like wind or things like that.
Or like students passing you in the hallway.
Right, exactly. So I had like this uniform of these pregnancy leggings, maternity leggings, pregnancy leggings, maternity leggings, these like flowy shirts. And I'm wearing in a pregnancy outfit, maternity outfit right now. And like a cardigan, a longer one. And I think I wore that with sneakers. I was in sneakers at 4 months. I had doctor's orders to wear sneakers because it was just...
And I, of course, to support you, started wearing sneakers more often.
Yes.
You know, I just didn't want people judging you. Not that I like sneakers better or anything.
Right. And I definitely... the other thing that shocked me is I had to move into maternity clothes way faster than I thought I would. Like, I was like, oh, Taryn's like, oh, yeah, use the elastic band trick with your pants and things like that. Yeah. My bloat was so big that at 6 weeks pregnant, I did not fit into any of my pants, even with it.
You're very small, tall, but skinny. Yes. So you had a lot of skinny jeans and stuff. I had baggy stuff. So that's why I was able to get away with it for longer.
Yeah. So I Yeah, I did what Taryn told me to do. She's like, just buy the size next up. She's like, because then when you come back down from weight, then you have pants to fit into. And maybe someday I will fit back into those pants, but I'm still in maternity clothes. So
well, they're the best. They need to make like a non-maternity maternity line because they're so comfortable.
Yeah, and I didn't plan on breaking my leg and not being able to lose the weight. And I'm not one of those people that can lose weight just by food like other people. I have to do exercise also. So, that was my uniform. And I would say at 7 weeks, at 7 months, that's when things started to get harder and I could do less. Yes. I couldn't do my workouts. I couldn't do my walks as long as I wanted to.
We had students come up to her in class.
Yes, I did not always stand as much, so that was different. What was really funny though is I co-taught biology that year with Sandy, who is actually on one of my shows also, when I talk about my broken leg. And Sandy was like, let's see how long it takes the kids to say something.
Yes, to notice.
So, it was February when we said something in my biology class, and the kids were like, I was like, hey, so I'm like, you didn't say anything? They were like, no, we were always taught to never say anything.
At least their parents are bringing them up well.
Right. It was just so funny.
Wow, she's really packing on the pounds.
I know. I was like, what did you guys think I would like? I mean, you had to have known. Like, it's not like I was hiding the belly. It was very obvious, I thought. So that was just one of the fun things. And then I would say my doctor had said something to me in March, and she was like, oh, you might not be able to. I had kept telling Taryn, oh, I'm coming until I'm like, I'll be in labor and I'm coming in to work because I want to.
Until he is born.
Yeah. I'm like, I am not staying home for any reason. I'm like, I used up all these days at the beginning. I don't have the time. I'm like, I can't do it. And at this point, first of all, we'd had 10 snow days at this point.
Oh my God, so many snow days.
So that adds on 2 weeks of school. So that's 10 days I already knew I was not going to get paid because I was not going to come back for 2 weeks. So I was concerned at that point. So I was like, I cannot leave early. I cannot do it. I will be here no matter what. And she was like, you might need to start thinking that you are not going to make it to your, my goal was to make it to April break and take a week off. And then I was supposed to have the baby. And I was like, that's plenty of time.
No problem.
And she was like, I don't think you're going to make it. I'm like, I'm healthy. I'm walking. I'm doing everything. I'm eating. I've put on the weight. And that was the other thing. I put on no weight from when I found out I was pregnant to 4 months. And then from 4 months to 6 months, I put on 30 pounds. And then 6 to 7 months, I put on 10 more pounds. So I was 40 pounds heavier at that point. And from 7 months on, I did not gain another ounce. Wow. I stayed the same. I just had gained my 40 pounds. So it doesn't always come slowly or a pound a week or whatever they say.
And you personally don't necessarily end up gaining a pound a week or a half a pound a week when your baby is growing.
Right.
Because it gets harder to eat the further along in the pregnancy you are.
And the other thing is we did not find out the sex of our child. We did not want to know. And my response was always, we're taking it home no matter what it is. So I don't need to know. And it was kind of fun and kind of silly because people would be like, oh, you're definitely having a girl or you're definitely having a boy. And I was like, okay, but we don't know. So it's not definite.
One of my favorite gifts you got at your shower was the boy outfit and the girl outfit.
Yes.
And I was like, well, she'll be able to use half of these.
Exactly. So, yeah. And that was the other thing. We had our shower at our house when I was 6 months pregnant. And we had it earlier because I was I had 3 friends who had their babies at 8 months. And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, because I'm a planner. Yeah. I'm like, I need to if people are going to buy me things, I need to know what it is and I need to have everything and everything needs to be in its place. which again did not happen. Don't worry. But I tried. So, and that was great. At my shower, I had these great guessing games to people guess the date and the sex of the baby. And if you are at one of those things and you have to guess, do not be cruel and guess 2 weeks after someone's due date.
So demoralizing.
It's horrible when I read through some of those. So yeah. So at 8 months, I was like, okay, I need to make sure everything at work was done. I had all my plans in, I had everything ready. And I was like, okay, well, whatever, I'm like, I still have 2 more weeks. It's fine. Mm-hmm. And I went to the doctor and I had the paperwork for her to sign. And I was like, I guess you have to sign the date that you're saying I have to stop working before I go out on maternity leave if I have to go out early. And this was the last week in March, and she signed the paperwork for that day. I was like, I can't stop. I'm like, I got to go in tomorrow. And she's like, I'm telling you, you're not going to make it past next week. And I was like, I have to. She's like, you are on your feet all the time. You're walking too much. She's like, you can't sustain this. And I was like, I'll be fine. So I decided with my doctor that I would come out a week earlier than I had originally planned. So the second week in April, I was like, okay, I'm not going to come back for that second week in April. It'll be fine. It's a week earlier, but whatever.
Yeah. What's 1 week?
So the next week I go to the doctor and she's like, nope, not going back. You're done. Yeah. So I was 36 weeks at that point. 35 weeks at that point.
Yeah.
And she was like, you're done. You're not going back tomorrow. I was like, no, tomorrow's my easy day. She's like, no, you are not going back tomorrow. She's like, you can't do it anymore. She's like, your blood pressure's all over the place. You're exhausted. I was spotting. She's like, is going to work tomorrow more important than you keeping that baby in there for 2 more weeks or, 5 more weeks?
That's the wake-up call you needed to hear.
It was. So I stopped working. And that next day, I can tell you, I stayed in bed and I slept the whole day. I mean, I got up a few times. I didn't need to eat. I wasn't even hungry. And I was able to sleep. I was one of those people that didn't struggle sleeping too much. There was some times where I struggled to sleep. And obviously at the end, you're getting up a lot. But I had one of those, it's like a long U-shaped pillow.
Yes, I love that pillow.
So, and I used that at 20 weeks. I started using that. And that's just what I used. And that's what worked for me. So that was it. So I think we'll stop it there. And then
to be continued.
Yes, he does come out. Spoiler alert. So we'll talk about my birthing story next time. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and go hit subscribe and follow us on social media. So, and give us some reviews. We would love some reviews.
Reviews, reviews.
Not just stars, but actually with words reviews. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. And we will talk to you next time. Bye.